Welcome to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast, brought to you by the Wealthy Speaker School. This is the podcast dedicated to people who want to speak more as a way to build their income and grow their business.
Hey, welcome everyone to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. I'm your host, Jane Atkinson. Today we are talking about shoring up your uncertainty tolerance. Love that term. Our special guest expert is Sara Ross. Welcome, Sara.
Hi there.
I'm so happy to have you here. You're known as a vitality and emotional intelligence expert, something I think that we all could use a good dose of right now. Talk about your business model in general.
I feel like I always need to set the context when it's like, I'm an emotional intelligence expert. Okay, I am a work in progress expert, just to be very clear. Okay. My husband, because we're all working remotely, is a room away and he'll be like, I don't know. Sometimes I wonder.
I would challenge your expertise right about now.
It is so true. He called me this weekend and we were talking about something. He's like, don't you teach this? And I was like, yes.
Yeah.
So that, I always say, that is the thing that I study. I study part of it for myself so that I get better at these things, but I also, in the world of leadership, it's that prerequisite foundational piece. So I spend a lot of my time on stages doing keynotes. I spend a lot of time researching, and then I also do a lot of one-on-one coaching.
Very good. Very good. And of course, we're recording this on April the 6th. So we're about a month from when things kind of blew up in terms of all of the speeches just started to go away. Tell us a little bit about how that came down in your business. And then I want to talk to you about this whole idea of uncertainty tolerance, because I want people to understand that you're living it right now.
Oh, completely. So it is so funny because I actually ended up posting something. I remember it was the second last keynote I did, and there was rumblings of it, and it was like, hey, we have to be careful. And it was this funny thing that it was like, oh, we'll elbow bump to really show people we are not shaking hands. Yeah. And it was 3 days later, I had left my last keynote and they had actually adjusted it already. So I knew things were happening. So it was like supposed to be to a big group of people. It ended up just being to the board. Oh. So I take off and I land, and I hear, as soon as we land in Toronto, I can hear all these people kind of gasping and making these breaths. And as soon as we landed, I looked and I saw that the NBA had been on hiatus. And it's so interesting because we all have, like, this is going to be one of those moments where
this is the measurement stick. If
it is.
The NBA is shut down, then this is big.
That's it. There's a before this and after this, and everybody has their moment when it became real. And as soon as I saw that, I thought, yeah, that's it. And I remember driving home that night and just thinking like, okay, so everything that we had planned is going to change. Yep. And so
how many engagements are we talking about for you? Just, I want people to really understand.
Yeah.
You and I work together.
So I'm pretty lucky in the sense that majority of them are looking like we are doing a reschedule, but I think we're at about 13 that have been off the table. And that takes us to like June.
Right.
So that is a little
probably June, July, and August are in jeopardy right now as well.
So we're holding on to some June things. It's one of those things. Personally, I'm a researcher at heart. I go to the brain science, and my next story will demonstrate this. I know that our brain struggles with loss. Like, we really hate loss. So my immediate response is to go to worst case scenario, and then anything that it's not, everything else that adds on to that is going to be gravy. So from my perspective, I'm in like worst case scenario that we're not, getting together and standing on stages till January.
If you make peace with that idea,
yes,
then if it happens sooner,
gravy,
then I think you're like, oh, okay. But making peace with the worst case scenario is really not a bad thing to do. And I always end up with living under a bridge, but that's sometimes the worst case scenario for me.
For sure.
But it's really not. It's just that anything short of that feels like a win. So
well, it does. And with that being said, I was speaking to one of the bureau agents who was just so wonderful. I loved his perspective because he was also so vulnerable. And he said something that really was grounding for me. He said, we no longer have to think about what would worst case scenario be.
This is it.
This is it for this industry.
Yeah.
I mean,
and this is worse. This is far worse than 9/11. And the effects are going to be far reaching. Talk about this term,
absolutely,
that uncertainty tolerance.
Yep.
This is something, it's like it's like a resilience that we have to build up. Talk about that.
It is. So I'll tell you where, it's actually a term that's used in healthcare, and it's kind of prominated, or it came from healthcare, because with so many changes going on in healthcare, it's helping kind of the health practitioners get comfortable with not having all of the information and trying to make decisions. So where this really became life for me, and what I am drawing on, because what I keep working with clients and talking about with people. So anybody who's talking to me is going to be like, Sara just talked about this. There is an element to the fact that we have all been through hard things. Everyone has been through hard things. Like I keep saying, we've been training for this. We don't necessarily appreciate this. So for me, I can tell you that in 2016, my mother passed away from cancer. And so she'd had cancer. We thought we beat it. And then it came back. And I share this story because I remember when her diagnosis came back in, cancer had invaded her liver and her bones and her lungs. And it was, worst case scenario, but nobody could give us specific answers. And I became absolutely obsessed with trying to figure out how long she would be with us. And the reason I did this is because I felt like as soon as I had that piece of information, then we could make good decisions. I could figure out, I was working at a leadership firm.
You wanted your worst case scenario.
Yes. I had a whole team, a whole division I was responsible for. So it was like, when should I leave work? And what's the best treatment options we should consider? I mean, there was all of these pieces that decisions need to be made. And so I obsessed for probably 2 weeks straight trying to figure it out. And the researcher in me, I went to research papers. I had ended up reaching out, sending all of her results over to Johns Hopkins and having folks there look at it. I tapped into doctors and specialists that I had worked with over my life. And I say all of that because it almost broke me. I was so overwhelmed with trying to have answers until there was that tipping point of it was a doctor that said, you're going to get a different answer from every single person. You will not know what's happening in the future, but don't miss the present because of it. And anyone who's been through anything like that, that was a tipping point. And what ended up happening for me was, it was just this, and I went into the data and the research, but it was, what if I stop fighting reality? And it's a hard beast to tame, but what if I just accept what is going on? That doesn't mean we roll over. It doesn't mean that we give up. It's just, this is what is going on. And can I get more comfortable with not knowing the answers? Can I be more comfortable, which I became more comfortable, making decisions on the information that's available to me? And even now I think back and I catch myself defaulting into that hindsight bias. Hindsight kicks our butt sometimes because we're like, I should have known this. I've heard lots of speakers talk I should have been preparing my business this way. I heard about COVID-19. I should have known. Nobody knows. No. Nobody knows what's in the future for us. Nobody had been through a pandemic before, and we catch ourselves trying to then say we should have made certain decisions, but we can't. So the uncertainty tolerance is really, can you get comfortable knowing that you do not have all the answers? In fact, not even being able to put an end date on it, and still know that you are going to make the decisions that you can, the best way you can with the information that's available with you, that's available to you right now. And even if they aren't the right decisions, as cliche as it sounds, what do we take from that and learn from that? So many people, like I really started this business and really doing, speaking being the main thing that I do. I'm only in the second year of it. And so there's so many kind people who reached out. They're like, this must be terrible. I don't love it. I'm disappointed and I'm sad and I'm missing things. I none of that.
The loss.
I feel the loss, but I know that I can sit in uncertainty. I know that I can. And the more people can do that, and I think I put it into an acronym because that's how my brain works. And my philosophy is, how do you lead yourself through that whenever you can? Because people are responding. And Jane, like, I know you've had to have seen this. Our brain's overwhelmed by this. And the brain science is, when there is a massive disruption, when it's an emotional situation, our brain's designed for emotions to get the upper hand. That's everyone's brains. Right. So no matter what and how strategic you are, everyone is feeling the emotional impact of this.
Yeah, for sure.
All emotions are okay. The challenge is not all reactions are helpful. And so, I mean, I'm sure you've seen this. There are some people who are defaulting into the classic, just like deer in headlights freeze mode. Like there's an inaction. There's just an overwhelm. Like, have you seen that from people?
I've seen it for maybe 2 and 3 days on the front end of it, curled up in a little ball, and then poof. We've had people that we've coached through it, and whoop, they're up, and now they're leading the charge and leading others. So it's like you're out of your ball and you're in action.
and the challenge, and the one thing I will say is that may cycle for people again. And then there's some people who are, I know that I probably struggle with this a little bit sometimes. One of these two, there's either that kind of trying to hold on to the old way. Like, it's almost that denial of like, this won't be as bad as everybody thinks it's going to be, like trying to hold on to the old stuff. And it seems like this would be the best approach, but when we jump into solution mode immediately. Right. But it's a little bit scattered. It's a little unfocused. It's like, do this. No, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. And it's this action or inaction.
There on the front end, and it felt a little unfocused, like you said. And our whole year this year was all about sticking with the plan.
Exactly.
So right now I'm hunkered down, trying to keep all the team in place. And trying to stick with the plan in the way that makes the most logical and fiscal sense.
Totally.
So can we keep everybody on at the same pace that they were at? Probably not. But can we just scale back everything just slightly and keep the momentum going forward? That's my goal. And this will be good conversation that I will have had before my team meeting tomorrow morning. And I appreciate it. Now, did we get the acronym from you? What's the acronym?
No. Okay. So LEAD is LEAD. So what it really means that it's our ability to shift into learning mode, which is nothing new. But again, the more we can be like, what can I learn from this? How can I reflect on this? And this is individual. Like you just said it. I think a trap is when people get comparing themselves or like looking what everybody else is doing. Like some people, this is like go mode.
Like, why are those people surviving this just in such a beautiful way when I'm over here struggling? It's so easy to get into the comparison mode. And I really think the learning, Sara, has to be, because I can just see this deluge of material coming at us right now. Okay, learning is happening. But I think we should be very intentional with our learning. And I actually think that this period in time is going to teach us something about ourselves. And a good line I heard was, how can I grow through this?
That's it.
Rather than how can I go through this? How can I grow through this? And I feel like that's at the heart of the learning. It's not just learn everything you can and take it.
I couldn't agree more.
I think we're already overloaded with that. We're only a month.
I think that is so so on point, that actually some distilling of that and curating of what we're taking in is huge. But we all know that mindset of like being willing to learn something means also, okay, I'm going to be more open to feedback, and maybe somebody might challenge me on my business model, and am I willing to just hear them out and then take that in and make that decision? Yeah. And I think learning mode, the one thing I will say, especially for those that are so used to being successful, is when we're in learning mode, we're more apt to ask for help when we need help. And I think for a lot of people, that is still a hard thing to do, especially in the world of experts and world of speaking, because people ask us to come and do that. And so sometimes to be like, I'm really struggling, like even the thing I'm teaching, I'm struggling to apply that. I mean, when we're in learning mode, it's easier, but that vulnerability, that humility, that displacing of, and I hate this word, but it's the only one to use, like getting our ego out of the way and then allowing people to help us also, because we're so used to helping that it's, so I think that's a huge one.
When we get together in our groups in our mastermind, I did this at our last live event where most of the people were there. I'm like, okay, everybody, let's take off the cape.
Yeah,
you don't have to be the superhero in this room. You can come and be exactly where you are and be vulnerable. And I think that who motivates the motivational speaker?
Even
becomes the question, right? And that's sometimes is us. That's sometimes
I couldn't agree more. Even when you said take off the cape, and I don't consider myself like saving things, but there is a visceral, like there's a visceral thing to say, okay. It is okay to ask for help. It's okay to lean on one another. I had a friend say to me, and I'll finish this acronym, I promise, but she gave me this beautiful piece of feedback, and it's just came over the weekend. She said, she sent me a note after we had talked, and she said, thank you for letting me help you this time. And she had said, you don't always ask for help, and I wasn't sure how to help. And I'm getting better at uncertainty tolerance. I sometimes have a hard time saying like, I need help. And I'd reached out to this person because I knew that she could be a sounding board and she could challenge some of my perspectives that I needed challenged. But it really hit me that there's almost a disservice when like I feel value in being able to help people, but I take that away from people if I don't give them the opportunity to do the same thing. And so it was a really important learning for me. And I feel like there's a strengthening in a relationship, and my logical brain would know that, but just to actually do that, I think was really important. So that learning means different things for different people.
I want to come back to identity in a second.
I'm hitting it.
What's your E of your?
Okay, so E is build on our experiences. So it goes right back to, we've all like, right before this happened, everything we were talking about was innovation and disruption. So it's not like we're like, wow, we've never been disrupted before or changed. Like we do know what this feels like. We've never been through this before. But it's the same thing, that one of the things that's grounding me right now is being okay with not having an end date, not having those answers, and making decisions based on what I have available to me. So we all have these experiences. And so to use the successes, but I still think there's value. Look at the times when things didn't turn out the way you wanted.
Look at your year one of your speaking business. For some people, that was a really rough year. Getting through it was difficult. And so you do have, and there's been bumps before. We had 9/11 in our industry. We had 2008 in our industry. And there are a lot of people who have been over these speed bumps before. This one feels more like a mountain. But we do have the capabilities to move past. That's really good. Okay, so E is for
E, build on our experiences. A is, you're gonna hear, it sounds, I've already talked about it. A is, how do we ground ourselves in acceptance? And it's a word that people have a hard time with. I'll say it again. It doesn't mean that you throw your hands up, but when your energy is going to fighting things like I wish it wasn't this way. If this just happened, if I'd done this in my business before, if I hadn't have done this in my business right before, that is so much energy goes into this, and this is energy consuming. So it's that piece of, this is what is happening. Now ground in that and use that to launch forward in.
Okay, good. And what is the D?
This one goes right to identity. This is, how do we, D is dimensions. How do we add dimensions onto our identity right now? So for so many of this, there was, and it's been used, identity quake is a term that was coined by Doug Stone and Sheila Heen when they were, when they wrote a book called Difficult Conversations. And it's this idea of like, when we get feedback, like certain feedback's hard for us to hear. If we feel like it's where somebody's questioning our competence or our relationship is at risk, right? There's these things, but for all of us, I think for so many of us, and Jane, you and I talked about this, our identity gets built into what we do. Like, I'm very conscious when to not say, I am a keynote speaker. I really work on saying, I do keynote talks. Like, I do keynote speeches.
Right.
Because when I'm a keynote speaker, I've actually heard a couple of keynote speakers say, well, I'm a keynote speaker who's pretty much unemployed right now.
Ooh,
and then that's a scare, like, and they're joking about it.
Yeah.
But when we tie our work and our worth in together, when what we do is who we are, then something like this can be overwhelming. And so for me, one of the things that I have found that works is I've taken this moment and recognized that a slight adjustment in my mission statement, like what I'm looking to help people with, has helped me to be a better service. So even though I kind of work on this world of vitality and helping people deal with leadership fatigue and tap into this sense of aliveness and energy, that is still a little bit over here for people. So similar to what you said, my goal is to help people recognize that we don't have to just get through this. We can be stronger because of this. And it's so small, but I want people to come out of this with kind of wisdom and confidence versus cynicism and fear.
Yeah.
And those, I think those really, no one will come out of this neutral. That's the one thing. No one's coming out of this neutral. We will be stronger, or we will feel smaller. Like, there's one way or the other. So for me, it's just to kind of redefine, to be of service around that, and expanding that identity of what it is that I'm doing right now.
You know, I remember Ryan Estes saying to me once that he really had to claim his identity. So he was a vice president of a company.
Yep.
And then he had to claim his identity as a keynote speaker.
Yep.
But I was always encouraging all my clients to really see themselves as an expert and a problem solver versus this one form of delivering your knowledge, because it's not that for most speakers, I can say 95% of the speakers that I know, that's not the only part of their business model.
Exactly.
You write, you do books, you consult, you coach, you do webinars, you do all of these other things, and keynote speaking is just one part of that. And I think for those who are really struggling with your identity right now, think about what problem you really want to help solve. And Sara, you just gave yours beautifully.
Well, thank you. I think it's the problem you want to solve, the impact you want to have, and who you want to be through it.
Oh, that's really good. That's a nice addition to, you know, being identified with whatever problem that you're helping to solve. Even when you're sitting next to someone on a plane, you know, think about it from that perspective. So I've never really associated with being a coach.
Yeah.
Although,
that's funny, myself either.
Yeah, right. It's one of the ways that I distribute my knowledge, but I write books. And so people on a plane might say, oh, what do you do? And I say, well, I help people who speak for a living build the businesses of their dreams. And they're like, oh, how do you do that? Well, I'm a coach and I write books and I have a podcast and I do all this stuff. And so I've never had my identity be one of a coach, even though it's a big chunk of my time every day.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's why you're so wonderful at what you do, because you can share that with people. But there is something about when our success is tied up in the outcomes also. Like I know, there was really fun, great momentum, like relationships that I had been building were creating this really great traction. And those relationships don't go anywhere. But I caught myself at one point, where I get this like high. I'm sure I'm not the only one, but I get this, I'd be like, woo, got booked, woo, got booked. And I caught myself, and the way I said it is like, I got hooked to the book. Like it was that like, oh, great, I got booked. But what really got me was then I was doing something where I had multiple keynotes in 1 week. I could feel myself kind of running on fumes, which I work very hard not to do. But I also caught myself the night before one of them working on the kind of customization, like the kind of market. And that's one of the things that I value. Like that a part of my identity is to be able to really tweak and hone in on the message that is relatable to the experiences that people are having. Right. And so what I realized was this getting hooked on booking was actually getting in the way of the value that I offered. And so having that kind of multi-dimensional definition of what my identity is and kind of rewriting that script of it keeps me grounded and helps me figure out my red flags. Because like one of my big ones is how to travel in a way and work on the road in a way that I stay healthy.
Yes.
Like that's actually if I'm running on fumes for too long, then I am not doing my job correctly.
And you're not walking your talk either.
Which right? Integrity, it turns out, is a pretty important thing. But no, but that's it. So all of these pieces are aligned. And I think that there's an opportunity for people to really, it doesn't mean this, I keep saying it this way, this isn't a do-over moment. This is a reset and do better moment. Like even when as we are coming out of this, we will not be the same. And we have more control over what that is going to look like. And we have to, I mean, it's the cliche, control what you can control and get better at identifying the things that you can't, and then decide how you're going to show up in those situations. So I think identity right now for many people, they don't even realize that it has been dismantled, shaken up, disrupted, and that's a good place to get our grounding again.
Wow. And go back to why did we get into this business in the first place? And
exactly.
I really like what you said, like about the game of bookings, like, oh, I got another one. There's like which part.
Oh, that means I'm good. Yeah.
You have to really break down and say to yourself, which part about this process do I get the most jazzed about? And I think really understanding how to lead a balanced life and not getting out of balance with getting hooked on the bookings is so good. Here's a quote from Dave Hollis that I reposted today. In the rush to return to normal, use this time to consider which parts of normal are worth rushing back to.
I love it.
Good.
It is. It's, you know, it's one of those things. That's the do better. Like, so we do even, it's amazing. There are still lots of things coming our way. I had somebody just say to me, oh, such a great insight by this person. And they said, I complained about email all the time. And all of a sudden I'm not getting email. And I feel like I am not being successful. And it's like that busyness, not even busyness, email.
Yeah.
Getting email was a kind of
like a drug
of you're needed. And we are, I mean, if I can go on to the brain science forever, there is that like that dopamine hook to that. So it's not only just it's tied to our worthiness, but that actual neurological exchange of worthiness and being chosen, like those are real things that equally have to be managed. And especially I think that you're going to see from speakers, and I want people to expect this. We went through this like up and down of this dopamine high. Like I'm pretty good at keeping boundaries around news and different things that way because I get overwhelmed by it remember I said, I sometimes put my head in the sand. I'm like, I know it's bad. I don't need to hear it 14 times, but there was this constant novelty that we were tapping into. So it's like, what's happening now? Oh my gosh, it got worse than I thought it was going to get. Like, we actually have gotten hooked on that.
And brain wants to be startled.
Yes.
Right.
It wants that novelty. Yeah. And then we'll have this honeymoon stage where it's like, okay, we can do this. And we can. But what's really natural is that this is grief. There is an element, a loss of what was to what is. And so there will be a down curve. Yeah. There is nothing wrong with that. We will we will probably be less productive. Like, we actually will have gone on a productivity spike.
Yeah.
And we might find that focus more challenging. All the cute ways we are doing our Zoom meetings, all of a sudden when we're doing 9 hours of Zoom meetings and the same annoying thing happens in the background noise. I have Canada geese in my backyard, which keep freaking me out because they're mating and they're very loud. But it's all of these things that there'll be a little bit of a down, and then there's a back up. But I believe that really being okay to let some of those emotions come in is where some of the most important reflection will occur. And then we decide, what are we rushing back to, and what do we want to be different on the other side of this? Because now we have the time to slow down and actually start putting those practices in place. We don't have, I think it's John Acuff who calls them the noble excuses. It's like, well, I can't because I'm so busy getting on planes. And it's like, oh, I do have time to exercise. I just don't. Like, exactly. There's no excuses. I
want people to recognize that they may be feeling low because they're not getting those regular hits of dopamine they're used to, right? That's right. Not,
so how do we redefine
these little bit of a roller coaster? And it's like, you build yourself back up and then you don't get the emails or whatever that you're used to. And you're so used to those hits on a regular basis. Right. I think this is really good. Now, I want to talk for just a couple of minutes about doing virtual presentations, just because you're really good at them. You've had a lot of calls from people saying, hey, how do I adjust? Let's just talk about the adjustment of the process if you were delivering a keynote virtually. We won't get into webinars and things like that because I think it's out there. It's being done a lot. Let's talk about what your adjustment would be if you were going to deliver a virtual keynote. Would you do it right where you are right now?
Pardon me?
We're doing this, by the way, visually. So if you're not tapping into the YouTube video, check it out on our YouTube channel. We are recording this video as well as audio.
So first thing, I always think that it's important. So expectations are just such an important thing to set. I have been, and I'll just say, I'm amazed how many different ways people talk about a virtual keynote, a webinar. Somebody just asked me to do a virtual keynote, and then they were like, okay, so for 3 hours, and can we use breakout rooms? And then I was like, I'm totally open to this conversation. I want to be really clear. That isn't a keynote.
That is not a virtual keynote. Yeah.
So it's even getting really clear on some of those things. Right. I had a chance to do a webinar with Tim Matthew and from Speaking. Right. And so we were actually just even talking about, we need to build a list of questions so that people can get on the same page really quickly. I know
we can't even get on the same page about what to call it, Sarah.
That's it.
Somebody doesn't like virtual. Somebody doesn't like remote. Somebody doesn't like this. Okay, whatever. Let's just call it something.
That's it. And there is a little bit of like, so weirdly, that's often just our emotional brain actually kind of pushing back on, here's all the reasons why this isn't good. So let's get caught on the semantics. Like that's what we naturally do. So whatever you want to call it, I do think the one thing that starts to change is, and this is important because I don't think that all content translates the same way.
Oh, good point.
I really don't. And so I think that there is an opportunity. And this is where, when you're not tied, when your worth and your work are not tangled up together, you can step back and say, okay, so what parts of this are going to translate in the most effective way? And I think when we are able to depersonalize that, talk to, whether it's a direct client, a bureau partner, but to actually get into that, I think that's really, really important.
That's
because
really
even some keynote people, like how they move across the stage is a huge component on how they deliver their message.
Right.
So I think there's a small part of, and I believe this, there's never, ever been a better time to do things imperfectly. Never. And it's almost like, don't miss the opportunity, because you can test right now. Because here's the thing, at least in Canada and the US primarily, you can't even just go to the store and go buy, all this wonderful equipment. I went to go order something on Amazon. They're like, a little bit longer of a delivery, and it's like May 4th. I got a lot to do before May 4th, but I know they might surprise me and it might come earlier, but it means that everyone is doing stuff with what they have available to them.
Yes.
And it doesn't need to be perfect. So I think there's a mental shift, especially for professional speakers who that is the primary component of their job, when they are so used to being able to have these 80 people who make it beautiful and can move across this gorgeous stage and everything is perfect. I think we just really need to let go of perfection.
Okay, so I've got 3 points. First, you need to define it with your client, what success looks like. Then you need to decide which parts of your programming actually belong. Your content may not translate. Yep. And then you need to be okay with lacking perfection.
And I will say I think the other one that becomes really important is recognizing that, do you have to decide if you're just going to talk at a screen, but the pacing of what you do is different also.
Right. Change up your pacing. And if you're doing something that is interactive, be okay with dead air. Because you have to wait for the comment box to populate.
Exactly.
So I think that's something, I think if it's a straight up keynote, it's just you talking the thing, like you can't really pause and let them laugh. So what do you do in that
situation? That's it. And so you have to, that's where, when you're used to drawing energy from the audience, like I think that's what a lot of speakers are missing right now. You draw energy from the audience draws energy from one another. Like there's a feel that starts to get created in an audience. And there's that laughter and that energy that is so contagious. So I just put something up about this because like I will literally use a Post-it note with a smiley face by my camera. But I do that because you have got to believe in the message that you are sharing. Yeah. And really ground it in the value that you are offering.
Yeah. I think you should laugh at your own jokes. I'll tell you why. I was watching Ellen this morning and she's just started doing her thing from home. And Andy's outside of the actual house on the other side of the glass. He can't see her because it's tinted, but she can see him. And he says, I don't know if this stuff is funny without the audience and the laughter. I can't tell. And I was thinking exactly the same thing, is that I was thinking, well, Portia should laugh. Let her get some sort of acknowledgement that was funny, because that's all she's doing. So all of these comedians and these late night people, they're figuring out how to do this right now. And you need to study them and see what some of the greats are doing, because but I think you definitely, so tip number 4 is your pacing and your energy. Be aware of it. If you're doing something interactive, you have to pause and allow them to participate with you. I like having, if it's a participation type thing, I like having a sidekick so that me and my sidekick can have a conversation while the comments are populating, because it takes people time to comment.
And in fact, that we can almost mimic some of the energy that gets created between people in an audience when we actually hear different parts of our brains are activated when we actually hear a conversation. So having those two voices can be incredibly powerful, but that might mean that you are asking different questions and waiting. So a story gets paced differently. We practice for a stage, you practice for a screen.
Yeah.
You can
Not the same.
It's not the same
at all. And please know that you cannot just come in and deliver exactly the same presentation, expecting to get the content can be good, and that'll probably be something that you can rest on, but you have to acknowledge that things are different.
It
and
is.
have to respect the differences. Sarah, you might be able to find somewhere in Toronto that you could say, who's open for business and go into a studio. I'm actually
already started it.
Okay, good. My friend
really
Chris Young works for a studio, a production company in Minnesota and Minneapolis, and they evolved and shifted like so fast and built a virtual studio, and anybody in Minnesota could actually just go there and with their client, their corporate client, and say, let's meet here.
It is so
and I'm
smart.
going to deliver it in a beautiful big studio. And I heard Alan Simmons talking about that as well.
I started those conversations already. Because I'm staying home and I'm staying safe, and I don't care how important the business is, stay home first. But there you go. There's my plug. But yes, I think I started those conversations because there's the distinction. If you're invited onto a client's platform, then primarily it's probably going to be this. But I see an opportunity. I don't anticipate, like I said, if it's better than this and sooner, wonderful. I'm not anticipating being with a group on a stage until January. What I see a great opportunity for is that there is production of virtual keynotes.
Yes.
So that they're speaking and slides can come in so there's something really powerful there. But I think that the cool part is that it can stream at a time, and then you can have like the speaker on and to do a bit of a Q&A, because there's the distinction of what you will get in a virtual setting that you cannot get in a live setting. And this, from experience, I can guarantee, number one, and I've said this a bunch of times, in a virtual setting, every single person gets a front row seat.
Love that.
There's power in that.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's not like just
the audience on a level that you never could with 5,000 people there.
That's it. And the second one is you can create intimacy with a group so quickly this way. Because it's that same thing of even like a Q&A after, or when people, it's like, imagine when people come up and stand in line to talk to you after, they still might have their colleague standing right beside them. Like, it's like, I'm asking for a friend, but when you can then, like, my non-negotiable is I won't do something unless I have a host, like somebody who's managing.
Yeah, that's your sidekick, your person on the ground.
That's it.
That's really important.
That's it. But then, so even for Zoom, WebEx, Adobe Connect, there's your, 3 of the main platforms. You can post things anonymously. So you can give people that space to ask those questions. And so then a speaker to really, really tap into answering questions on the content that they've shared that's relative specifically to your audience. That is a very hard thing to do unless it's like a chat on stage. But like, that's a beautiful opportunity. I have been involved in things where the connection, the vulnerability, and the intimacy is so much more heightened, so much more quickly, that the beautiful thing is, I would suspect the majority of people who do this work, we do this work to be of service in some way for people to take this. And so it's not the same experience, but different doesn't mean wrong. Different means an opportunity to do something differently in the future. And that's an add-on. I mean, and why not practice right now when we can be imperfect? So on the other side of this, we just have more options to connect with people and add value in a powerful way. Like, I have a hard time seeing the downside to that.
Beautiful. And I want to give a shout out to StreamYard. The most fun I've ever had doing a webinar was last Friday. We're doing every Friday in April. Chris West and I are doing
love Chris.
Facebook Live. Okay. So if you're wanting to do Facebook Live, but you want to do it in a way that is really cool, check out StreamYard, where you can pull people who are commenting right into the stream with you.
I love that.
Chris's PowerPoint and our two faces. And then here's Sarah from Facebook had this comment, and Sarah's face is there, and it's, oh my gosh, it's the most fun I've ever had on a webinar. So give a shout out to
that is one of the things I am challenging myself to do, is to do something like that. I've been hiding from social media. I am not anymore. There's enough people who get mad at me for it to do something, but like, there you go. There is another way to be interacting with people. I think that is
really is the most interaction that, and I kept wondering, am I really distracting Chris from his thought? Because I'm like whipping people onto the thing. I wanted everybody who was on there to be seen. And that was an engagement on a level that we had never had before. And it was the most fun. So check out StreamYard. We're going to put a link for y'all to save $10 into the show notes here, so that you can save a little bit of money on your first time out. I think it's really awesome. Sarah, I know we could talk for another hour about virtual presentations, but I want to say thank you so much. You have given us so much food for thought here today.
That makes me happy.
Thank you so much. Keep doing what you're doing. When I talked to you, we had a coaching call, I think it was last week, and I thought, oh, I just feel so good, like knowing you're in this really nice place. And I know we're both kind of like, woo,
absolutely,
with emotions and things like that. But I just want to say thank you. I feel like you've come at this from this kind of brainy place that I really needed to fill it up from. So thank you so much for being with us on the podcast here today.
Absolutely. And I hope everybody remembers, we are stronger than we sometimes give ourselves credit for. So that's my leading message. And thank you so much for having me, Jane.
Beautiful. And so, wealthy speakers, hey, give us a shout out. Let us know if you've appreciated this episode. And with that, we will say, see you soon, wealthy speakers. Bye for now, everyone.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed our show, you'll want to come and visit us at the Wealthy Speaker School, where we provide a proven roadmap for building your dream business. Go to wealthyspeakerschool.com. And for show notes for today's podcast, head on over to speakerlauncher.com and click on podcast. I'll see you soon, Wealthy Speakers.